Hey everyone! Thanks for tuning in this week for our next installment of the Serial Killer Files. Did not expect to be covering one so soon, but I had a request. Serial Killer File number 4 is on Robert Hansen, better known as the Butcher Baker. So as always, sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Robert Hansen was born on February 15, 1939 in Esterville, Iowa. He was the son of Danish immigrants Christian and Edna Hansen. Christian was very domineering, causing his relationship with his son to be a difficult one. Even as a young child, Robert was often forced to work long hours at the family-owned bakery, causing him to resent his father even more. He was bullied throughout childhood due to his stutter, which developed from him being forced to use his right hand rather than his dominant left, and he had severe acne. He had no close friends and was often described as a loner. Robert was shunned by the girls in school. He grew up hating them and nursing fantasies of cruel revenge. Since he had no friends, he found refuge in hunting and archery. He began practicing these in his free time, even going on to become an avid hunter. After graduating high school in 1957, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves. He became a skilled marksman, serving 1 weekend a month. He continued to work at the bakery the rest of the time. Robert sometimes volunteered as an assistant drill sergeant at the police academy in the town of Pocahontas. In 1960, he met a local girl named Dorothy during his volunteer work. The pair fell in love and married in the summer of the same year. On December 7, 1960, Robert and an employee from the bakery burned down the school bus garage of the local high school. He explained his actions were due to his continued feelings of mistreatment from the community. He was caught when the same accomplice turned him in. Robert was given 3 years in prison at Anamosa State Penitentiary. During his sentence, his wife would divorce him, leaving him alone. After 20 months served, Hansen was paroled. During his time, he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder with periodic schizophrenic episodes. The psychiatrist noted that Hansen had an infantile personality. He was obsessed with the idea of getting back at anyone he felt had wronged him. In 1963, Hansen married Darla. He and Darla decided to move to Alaska in 1967. The Hansens moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and began a family, having 2 children together. Robert was well liked by the community and even broke several hunting records. In December 1971, Hansen was arrested twice. Once for the abduction and attempted sexual assault of a housewife, and again for sexually assaulting a prostitute. He pled no contest to the assault in the offense involving the housewife. The secondary charge was later dropped as part of a plea bargain. Hansen received a sentence of 5 years in prison. After only serving 6 months, he was placed in a work release program and released to a halfway house. In 1977, he was again arrested, this time for stealing a chainsaw from Fred Meyer's, an Anchorage department store. He was given 5 years again. In addition, he was required to receive psychiatric treatments for his bipolar disorder. He would be prescribed lithium, but wasn't required by law to take it. The Alaskan Supreme Court reduced his sentence. After only a year served, he was released. During the early 1980s, Hansen reported a burglary at his home, which he actually staged. With the money he received from the insurance payout, he opened up his own bakery and established himself in the community as a well-liked businessman. In January 1982, Hansen purchased a Piper Super Cub bush plane for his hunting exploits, even though he had been denied a license due to the medication he was prescribed. It is believed Hansen began his crime spree after his sexual assault sentence, starting his serial career in 1973. He began picking up prostitutes from Anchorage's Tenderloin district and taking them by his bush plane to the wilderness where they would be assaulted and tortured. The ones who complied would be returned to Anchorage alive, whereas the ones who didn't, he killed. From 1973 to 1983, he abducted and assaulted at least 30 women in this fashion before letting them go. At least 17 women picked up during the years of 1980 to 1983 were less fortunate. Robert would take his victims, assault them, and release them into the woods. From there, he would hunt them down with a rifle like an animal. On June 13, 1983, Hansen offered 17-year-old prostitute Cindy Paulson $200 for her services. When she got into his car, he pulled a gun on her and drove to his home. There, she was chained up in his basement and tortured before Hansen decided to move her. She was put back into his car and driven to Merrill Field Airport. Here, Hansen intended to take her to his cabin in the woods. Paulson was crouched in the back seat of the car with her wrists cuffed in front of her body. She saw a chance to escape when Hansen was busy loading the cockpit. While his back was turned, Paulson crawled out of the back seat, opened the driver's side door, and ran as far as she could to the nearby road. She left her blue sneakers in the back seat as evidence that she had been there. Hansen panicked and attempted to chase her down, but he was too late. She had already flagged down a passing truck. She was taken to a nearby motel. Paulson pleaded with the clerk to allow her to call her boyfriend, who was at a different motel. The truck driver, who was startled by the girl's disheveled appearance, continued to work, where he called the police to report the barefoot, handcuffed woman. Anchorage police arrived but discovered the woman had taken a cab to Big Timber Motel. There, they found Paulson still handcuffed and alone behind the door of room 110. She was taken to headquarters where she recounted the events and described the perpetrator. Hansen, who was known, definitely fit the description. But when he was questioned, he denied the accusation, stating Paulson was trying to cause trouble because he wouldn't pay her extortion demands. Even though he had a rap sheet, his meek demeanor, humble occupation, and alibi cleared Hansen from being a serious suspect, and the case went cold. Around 1982, several bodies in and around Anchorage began popping up. Detective Glenn Floth of Alaska State Troopers had been part of the team investigating these bodies. The first of these bodies were found by construction workers near Eklutna Road. The body was dubbed Eklutna Annie by investigators due to her never being identified. Later the same year, the body of Joanna Messina, a topless dancer, was discovered in a gravel pit near Seward. Again in 1982, the remains of 23-year-old Sherry Morrow was discovered in a shallow grave near Nick River. Spent .223 shell casings were found in the dirt near the body, providing the only lead for detectives. Detective Floth now had 3 bodies and what appeared to be one killer. The FBI was contacted to aid with the current situation. Special Agent John Douglas was requested to help create a criminal psychological profile based on the 3 bodies. Douglas deduced the killer would be an experienced hunter with low self-esteem, possess a history of being rejected by women, and would feel compelled to keep souvenirs from victims. He also suggested the assailant might have a stutter. Using the profile, Floth investigated possible suspects until he reached Hansen, who not only fit the profile, but also possessed a plane to reach such deep wooded areas. Supported by Paulson's testimony and Douglas's profile, Floth and Alaska Police Department secured a warrant to search Hansen's plane, vehicles, and home. On October 27, 1983, investigators uncovered jewelry belonging to some of the missing women, as well as an array of firearms, including a .223 Ruger Mini 14, which was hidden in a corner hideaway in his attic. Found behind his headboard was an aeronautical chart with little X marks on it. Many of these marks matched sites where prior bodies had been found. When confronted with the evidence, Hansen denied it as long as he could, but would eventually begin to blame the women and tried to justify his actions. Hansen eventually confessed to each item of evidence as it was presented to him. He admitted to a spree of attacks against Alaskan women starting in 1971, majority being prostitutes or exotic dancers. His earlier victims were usually girls aged between 16 and 19. Hansen had 17 known victims. Megan Emmerich, aged 17. Missing date, July 7, 1973. Hansen denied killing her, but is suspected because of an X on his map. Mary Thill, aged 22. Date missing, July 5, 1975. Hansen denied killing her as well, but it is suspected because there's an X on the map. Horseshoe Harriet, aged 19 or 20. Her missing date is unknown, but they believe she was killed between the 1970s or early 1980s. The body was found in April of 1984. Eklutna Annie, aged 16 to 25. Her date missing is unknown, but they believe she was killed between November of 1979 to June of 1980. Her body was discovered on July 21, 1980. She had been stabbed in the back. By the time her body was discovered in a shallow grave, it had been partially eaten by wild animals. Roxanne Eastland, aged 24. Her date missing was June 28, 1980. The date she died is unknown. Also, her body was never found, but Hansen confessed to killing her. Joanna Messina, aged 24. She went missing in early July of 1980, and they believe she died around the same time. Her body was also found in late July of 1980. Her body was so badly decomposed, and it was found in a gravel pit. Lisa Futrell, aged 41. She went missing on September 6, 1980. It is unknown what time she died, but her body was found on May 9, 1984. She was found just south of Old Nick Bridge. Sherry Morrow, aged 23. She went missing on November 17, 1981. When she died is unknown, but her body was found on September 12, 1982. She was found in a shallow grave on the bank of Nick River. She had been shot in the back, but there were no bullet holes in her clothing, suggesting she had been shot while nude and then redressed before being buried. Andrea Fish Altieri, aged 22. She went missing on December 2, 1981. Her time of death is unknown, and her body was never found, but Hansen confessed to killing her. Sue Luna, aged 23. She went missing on May 26, 1982. Her time of death is unknown, but her body was found on April 24, 1984. She was stripped nude and forced to run through the forest while Hansen hunted her like an animal. She was shot to death. Delenn Sugar Frey, aged 20. It is unknown when she went missing, but they believe she died in April of 1983. Her body was found on August 20, 1985. The body was found by a pilot testing new tires on the sandbar of the Nick River. Paula Goulding, aged 17. She went missing on April 25, 1983. Her time of death is unknown, but her body was found on September 2, 1983. She was found in a shallow grave on the bank of the Nick River. She had been shot in the back, but there were no bullet holes in her clothing either, suggesting she had been shot while nude and redressed before being buried. Cindy Paulson, aged 17. She went missing on June 13, 1983, and this is the one who survived. She was kidnapped, tortured, and sexually assaulted before she managed to escape. Teresa Watson. It is believed she went missing between 1980 and 1983, and her body was found on April 26, 1984. Angela Federn, aged 24. It is unknown when she went missing, but it is believed she died between 1980 to 1983. Her body was discovered on April 26, 1984, near Figure 8 Lake. Tamara Tammy Peterson, aged 20. It is unknown when she went missing, but they believe she also died between 1980 and 1983. Her body was found on April 29, 1984. It was 1.5 miles from Old Nick Bridge. Celia Beth Van Zanten, aged 17. She went missing on December 22, 1971. It is unknown when she died, but her body was discovered on December 25, 1971. Hansen denied killing her, but it is suspected because of the X on his map. Out of the 17, Hansen was only formally charged with the murders of 4 women: Sherry Morrow, Joanna Messina, Eklutna Annie, and Paula Goulding. He was also charged with kidnapping and assault of Cindy Paulson. Once arrested, he was charged with several other charges, such as multiple weapons offense, theft, and insurance fraud. The last charge was related to the claim he filed when he faked his home burglary. After the ballistics test returned a match between the bullets found at the scene and Hansen's rifle, did he enter a plea bargain. He pleaded guilty to the 4 homicides the police had evidence for. He produced details about his other victims in return for serving his sentence in a federal prison with no publicity in the press. Another condition was his participation in deciphering the markings on his map to locate the victims' bodies. He confirmed the police theory of how the women were abducted, adding he would sometimes allow them to go if she convinced him that she wouldn't report. He indicated that he began killing in the early 1970s. He showed investigators 17 grave sites in and around south central Alaska, 12 of which were unknown to investigators. There remained marks on the map that he refused to give up, 3 of which were in Resurrection Bay near Seward. Authorities suspect 2 of the marks belong to the graves of Mary Thill and Megan Emmerich, whom Hansen has denied killing. The remains of 12 of a probable 21 victims were exhumed by police and returned to the families. Hansen was sentenced by jury to 461 years plus life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was first imprisoned at the U.S. Penitentiary Lewisburg in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. In 1988, he returned to Alaska and was briefly incarcerated at Lemon Creek Correctional Center in Juneau. He was also imprisoned at Spring Creek Correctional Center in Seward until May 2014. From here, he was transported to the Anchorage Correctional Complex due to health reasons. Hansen died on August 21, 2014, at age 75 in Alaska's Regional Hospital in Anchorage. It was due to natural causes from lingering health conditions. So, that was the story of Robert Hansen, or the Butcher Baker. I've never heard of this one before, and when I started researching it, I was kind of blown away. It's a real-life Most Dangerous game, and I had no clue. It takes a really demented person to hunt people for sport, and I don't know, man. It's a wild one. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber yet, join us. We would love to have you here. Thank you to all my viewers. I appreciate you guys more and more. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.